"Andrew, we're counting on you for everything after this," my parents said, brimming with excitement as they set off on their journey. My name is Andrew. I am 40 years old and have become the owner of a long-standing confectionery shop. My family's shop was established in the 1950s, and it's a somewhat famous store in the local area. My father, who is about to turn 70, had been serving as the shop's owner. "It's about time for me to retire and maybe go on a trip across America." It seems that both my father and mother have been dedicated to running this shop and haven't taken many long breaks, so going on a trip around America has been a dream for them. I have been training under my father's guidance for 25 years. It seems that my father wants me to take over the shop soon. I have always anticipated that day would come, and I have dreamt of inheriting this prestigious store since I was young. I made up my mind to protect this shop and declared, "If you approve, Dad, I would be delighted to take over here." My father nodded slowly. After that, my parents meticulously handed over the shop to me and my wife, who had been helping at the store. Just recently, I finally became the official owner. With cheerful smiles on their faces, my parents loaded their big luggage into the car. They said, "We're counting on you for everything else," and set off on their journey for a trip across America. "I hope you enjoy it, Mom and Dad." My wife said that with a smile. My wife has been helping me with the store while taking care of our son, but now that our son is in junior high school and has become a bit more independent, my wife can spend more time at the store. She always has a cheerful smile, and she has received positive feedback from the customers. She's truly a wonderful wife who gets along well with my parents. "I'm going for a delivery." Ever since I took over the shop from my father, I have been making deliveries to the usual supermarket. This supermarket has been our business partner for 20 years, since my father's time. It's a small, independently owned supermarket that deals with locally sourced vegetables from farmers in the area. It has gained a reputation among customers for offering affordable and fresh produce. They also handle other local specialty products. Since our shop doesn't have a large production capacity, we hadn't been making deliveries to places like this. However, the supermarket manager insisted on sourcing from us and expressed their desire to have our products. That's how the business partnership started. "Andrew, your parents are on a trip, right? Are they doing well?" When I went for the delivery, the store manager approached me. "Thanks to them, I receive cheerful emails from them every day." I replied with a smile, and the store manager nodded approvingly. "That sounds nice. I'm starting to think maybe I should retire and go on a trip too." The store manager is around the same age as my parents, so it makes sense for him to consider handing over the store. But I wonder who will take over. I remember that the store manager's son has a completely different job. It would be impolite to delve into that topic, so I remained silent. After receiving the delivery slip, the store manager asked, "We've been renewing our trade contract every 6 months. Would it be okay to continue with the same arrangement in the future?" "Yes, I have taken over from my father, so please continue to rely on me. Thank you." I said that and finished the delivery. About 2 weeks later, when I went to the supermarket for a delivery, I couldn't see the store manager. As I was unloading the goods, one of the regular part-time staff approached me. "Good morning, Andrew. Actually, about the store manager." According to the part-time staff, the store manager collapsed at home 2 days ago and was taken to the hospital by an ambulance. While there were no life-threatening conditions, it seemed that overwork was a factor, and there was an unexpected change in store management. "The new store manager is that person. He's the store manager's younger brother's son, I believe." The part-time staff said that with a frown on their face. I was puzzled by their reaction, but I soon understand the reason. When I greeted the new junior store manager, he stared at me and simply said, "Ah, well then, I will come for the delivery next week," I said, concluding our conversation. In a word, he is an unpleasant person. And the following week, when I went for the delivery, the junior store manager arrived. "You're the one from the confectionery shop, right?" I was annoyed at being called you out of the blue, but I managed to keep my composure. The junior store manager closely examined the confections I delivered. "Founded in 1950s? That explains it," he said. He laughed as he noticed the printed information on the packaging of the confections. "What do you mean?" I couldn't help but argue back. Then, the junior store manager spoke in a mocking tone. "I don't need outdated sweets like these. The contract is terminated." Caught off guard by the sudden words, I panicked. "But the contract..." As I tried to speak, the junior store manager interrupted me. "This entire store is outdated. I'm going to transform it." I felt anger rising within me, but I wondered what this person could actually accomplish. "When is the contract terminated?" I asked, and the junior store manager responded. "I don't need such outdated things, so it ends today. Is there something to complain about? Be grateful that I kept you around until now." I found his arrogant attitude so ridiculous that I laughed. "Feel free to do as you please." Seemingly angered by my laughter, the store manager hastily took the box containing the confections I delivered. The part-time staff, who had been observing the situation, approached me. "It's terrible, the store manager. He even said he doesn't need old ladies like us. I plan to quit, and so do all the other part-timers," she said. So it wasn't just me who experienced that attitude. Thinking that he was a disappointing person, I left the store. After a while, I heard from my wife, who was standing at the store, about the customers who came today. They were quite elderly customers who used to buy from that supermarket. However, our confections were no longer available at the supermarket, so they purposely took a bus to come and buy from us because they had guests coming. After that, a few more customers with similar stories came, and they all said the same thing, that the assortment at that supermarket had worsened and the prices had increased. The long-time employees had decreased, and there were many young part-timers who were slow and careless at the cash register, they said. It seems that the customers are now flocking to the big supermarket across from that one. Since we used to make a considerable number of deliveries to that supermarket, if they no longer need us, it leaves us with free time. Now we are using that free time to focus on developing new products. We have completed something we have been considering for a while, and the sales at the store have been quite good. Then one day my wife called me while she was at the store. Before me stood a man of about the same age as me, wearing a suit, and he introduced himself as Mr. Anderson. It turns out he is the store manager, and not just any store, but the big supermarket across from that one. He had wanted to carry our confections for a while, but my father had refused, he said. The reason was that the confections Mr. Anderson carried at that supermarket were made by an acquaintance of the store manager, and they were handmade, so they couldn't produce enough for deliveries. "Oh, I've noticed that your products haven't been carried at that supermarket recently, right? If they have ended the business partnership, I would love to have the opportunity to carry them at our store," he passionately expressed. It seems that Mr. Anderson was approached by customers who used to buy our confections at that supermarket, and they asked if he could carry them at his store since it seemed like the partnership had ended. And it wasn't just one person, but several customers made the request. To my delight, there were even customers who specifically visited that supermarket for our confections. Mr. Anderson himself also loved our confections. When I asked why he was so interested, he mentioned that his grandfather used to be a regular customer at our shop, and it was a taste he had grown up with. He understood how disappointed the customers would feel. Hearing his words made me happy, and I became more open to considering the business partnership. And so we started the business partnership with Mr. Anderson's supermarket. They had 3 branches in the city, which meant that we would be busier than before. Then after a while, we received a phone call at the store. The person on the other end of the line was shouting, "It's me, Cameron!" But I had no idea who that was. As I was bewildered, he shouted, "You don't recognize me? How ungrateful!" Could it be someone from another business partner or perhaps a wrong number? Trying to stay calm, I began to listen carefully, and finally I realized that the person on the other end was the junior store manager from that supermarket. What did he want from me at this point? And to accuse me of being ungrateful when he had done nothing for me. Thinking that, Cameron spoke in a strong tone.
I didn't hear anything about delivering to a rival supermarket. What is going on?
I sighed. Where we deliver our products is none of your concern, right? However, Cameron's momentum didn't stop.
Delivering to a rival store is a breach of contract.
He suddenly started saying things that made no sense.
I haven't breached any contract. I don't recall entering into any such agreement,
I calmly replied. But Cameron continued to shout relentlessly.
You should have known without it being explicitly stated in the contract. It's impacting our sales. I will bill you for the decline in revenue.
His arguments were so absurd that I couldn't argue back.
Anyone would understand that. What were you thinking delivering the same items to our rival store? I'll demand compensation. Be prepared.
The call ended with those words. My wife looks at me with a concerned look, but I smile and tell her not to worry. Actually, even if they make such a claim, it would be invalid, and there's no rule against delivering to a rival store, I said. After all, it was their decision to unilaterally terminate the business partnership. Well, I guess they're upset because their sales have dropped. A few days later, an envelope arrived at the store. When I opened it, it was an invoice from Cameron. He was demanding $20,000, citing that our delivery to the rival store had caused a decline in their sales. Moreover, it was handwritten and had messy handwriting. I never expected to receive something like this. As a precaution, I consulted the lawyer we always relied on, and of course, I was told that I had no obligation to pay and advised to ignore it. However, Cameron persistently kept calling multiple times.
Pay the compensation already.
When I answered the phone, his angry shouting echoed. What on earth was this man's problem?
There's no need to pay. I confirmed it with the lawyer.
I said that repeatedly, but the calls continued. Since there were other calls from customers and business partners, I couldn't simply ignore them or disconnect the phone line. So I asked Cameron to stop calling the store and suggested meeting in person if he had something to discuss, but he didn't listen. This continued for 3 days, and finally my patience reached its limit.
Just pay the money already. We're being inconvenienced here.
He sounded more like a debt collector than a supermarket manager. I had reached my boiling point, so I didn't care about his attitude anymore.
We're the ones being inconvenienced. We're constantly yelled at on the phone and falsely demanded to pay. Please, stop it already.
Cameron shouted back.
In that case, just pay the money.
With his stubborn insistence, I firmly responded.
I won't pay. There's no need to pay. If anything, you should pay us.
Finally, Cameron seemed to listen to my words.
Huh? What are you talking about?
I read out the contract that was prepared in front of me.
Between my father and the previous store manager, who is your uncle, we used to review the contract annually. The contract states that if either party wishes to terminate the agreement, they must give a 1-month notice. It also mentions that there may be a penalty for unilateral termination. This change in store manager doesn't affect anything for the other party.
Cameron fell silent, so I continued.
When you informed me of the contract termination, I wanted to convey this information to you, but you didn't listen, did you? Moreover, when the store manager suddenly changed, I didn't demand a penalty afterward because I understood there might be some confusion. I was willing to overlook your attitude for the sake of the previous store manager. However, you sent me an incomprehensible invoice and repeatedly called. Well, if that's the case, there's no problem if we also demand the penalty as stated in the contract, right?
As I said that, Cameron, who had been silent, began to panic.
Wait a minute.
Of course, I wasn't going to be lenient.
I will come over to your place right now.
I hung up the phone without listening to Cameron's rebuttal. I immediately headed to Cameron's supermarket. It had been a while since I last came here, as the deliveries to Mr. Anderson's supermarkets were now handled by a supplier. Mr. Anderson's supermarket was bustling with activity, but Cameron's supermarket lacked popularity. I asked the only employee I saw to call Cameron for me. Then I confronted Cameron and slammed the invoice on the table.
This is the contract. It should be mentioned here, but just to be sure, I brought a copy. Can you read it carefully? It's written right here, isn't it?
I couldn't sense the same confidence from Cameron as before. Perhaps this person couldn't maintain a strong front in face-to-face interactions. That's why he never came to our store or called me, and instead relied solely on phone conversation.
I can't afford to pay this.
Cameron weakly voiced his rebuttal. I continued with my statement.
Also, because of the repeated phone calls to our store obstructing our business and making unjust monetary demands, I will sue you for extortion, so be prepared.
Cameron turned pale and spoke with a trembling voice.
You have no evidence to support that.
I smirked.
Of course, the phone conversations have been recorded. I didn't intend for it to come to this, but since you wouldn't stop despite multiple warnings, I had no choice. It's affecting our store's operations and sales. The customers' orders are being disrupted because of your phone calls, which directly impacts our revenue. Oh, by the way, should I also include a claim for that?
Upon realizing that there was evidence, Cameron remained pale and...
Wait, I'm sorry. It's not what you think. There's an explanation for this.
I decided to hear his explanation for now.
There were unexpectedly many customers coming to buy confectionery. As a result, they stopped coming here, and when they started offering them at the rival store, the customers started flocking there. Look at our store, it's evident. With this situation, our business is suffering.
I glanced at the supermarket's books and commented.
There are no customers here.
Meanwhile, the supermarket across the street is filled with customers. As I said this, Cameron raised his voice.
That's right. Can't you see?
I shrugged off his attempts to cling on to me.
But it's not my concern. You were the one who terminated the contract without any justification. And you didn't want anything old-fashioned, right? Back when the previous store manager was in charge, there were many long-time, part-time employees, and the atmosphere was lively. Even I could see that. And it was because of you that those part-time employees left, and the products were replaced, leading to a transformation. That's the result, isn't it? It's all in your own doing. Please, don't blame others for your own mistakes.
Saying that, I left the supermarket, leaving behind the invoice. Later on, through my lawyer, I formally requested payment, and the penalty was paid. As for the charges of interference with business and extortion, we reached a settlement. When I met Mr. Anderson regarding the new confectionery business, he mentioned,
"By the way, the supermarket across the street is currently closed. Seems like that store manager was at fault after all."
Mr. Anderson had a connection with the previous store manager, and he also informed me that the previous store manager's condition had stabilized. After some time, the previous store manager visited our store. He apologized on behalf of his nephew, but I handed him a box of our new confectionery and said,
"This is our new creation. Please give it a try."
My wife, who was standing beside me, looked relieved. It turned out that the previous store manager's health had improved, and he had kicked his nephew out and resumed managing the business. The reason for the closure was to rebuild the business that his nephew Cameron had ruined. And at that moment,
"Is Andrew doing well?"
my parents said, entering the store at just the right time. I was surprised by the sudden turn of events, but apparently during their journey across America, they felt the desire to visit home once. It was great to see them enjoying a conversation with the former store manager. By the way, it seems that Cameron, after being forced to quit the supermarket, depleted his savings and got caught up in gambling in an attempt to increase his money. As a result, he ended up in financial debt. He turned out to be quite a character, but as the former store manager angrily told me, it was nothing to do with me. While maintaining tradition, I continued to sell new and innovative confections. Recently, my son has started showing interest in the store, and I hope he will take over in the future. I'm looking forward to that.